Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time we're taking a closer look at the recent passing of Jessica Aber, who many of you will know was the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia up until earlier this year.
Yeah, and we've got a whole bunch of different sources that we've pulled together for you today. News reports from outlets like the BBC, Newsweek, ABC, and CBS News. And we've also got some official briefing documents that kind of lay out the details of her career.
And the goal today is not just to sort of repeat the headlines that you may have already seen in those reports or heard about elsewhere, but to really get into, the story of Jessica Aber's career, the context surrounding her death, and give you that more complete picture that you just don't get from skimming those headlines.
Exactly. And the news broke just a few days ago on Saturday, March 22nd, 2025.
Yeah, Saturday morning.
That's right. And she was found at a residence on Beverly Drive in Alexandria, Virginia.
And police responded to a call around 9:28 a.m. local time.
Yeah. To reports of an unresponsive woman, and then, following that, her death was confirmed, and an investigation into the circumstances is underway.
Of course, standard procedure. In these cases, the Virginia Chief Medical Examiner will be responsible for determining the official cause of death. So we'll have to wait for their report for a definitive answer.
Right. We're waiting for that final word from the medical examiner.
But we do have some initial insights from some news reports.
Yeah. ABC News cited two sources close to the investigation that said, her death appears to be from natural causes and that there was no indication of foul play, at least at this stage.
Right.
But again, those are just initial kind of thoughts, and we'll have to wait for the, the official report.
Yeah, absolutely. And CBS and ABC News both reported that a family friend, indicated that her passing is believed to be the result of a longstanding medical issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to be cautious, before that official report. But those are the details that we have so far.
Yeah. So, it's interesting, even with just these few initial details, we already start to see that there's this much larger story to uncover, right? To really understand the significance of her passing. And we need to look at the trajectory of her career, both before and during her time as U.S. Attorney.
Yeah, absolutely. So before she became the chief federal prosecutor for the Eastern District of Virginia, Jessica Aber, she built a really solid background in law.
Oh, yeah.
Graduated from the University of Richmond in 2003, and then she went on to get her law degree from William & Mary Law School in 2006.
And right out of law school from 2006 to 2007, she served as a law clerk for Magistrate Judge M. Hannah Lack. And what's really interesting is that this clerkship was in that same Eastern District of Virginia where she would later lead the U.S. Attorney's Office. So you can kind of see that early connection to that legal community.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And then in 2009, she became an assistant U.S. attorney.
In that same office.
Yeah, and right away she was involved in prosecuting some really big and challenging cases.
Oh, absolutely.
Focusing on financial fraud, public corruption, and child exploitation.
I mean, these are incredibly complex and, really important areas of federal law enforcement. And her work as an assistant U.S. attorney really gave her that deep experience, and understanding of the legal landscape in that district, which undoubtedly prepared her for those future leadership roles.
Yeah, and in 2016, she was promoted to deputy chief of the criminal division. So that's, pretty clear sign of her growing expertise and the respect that she had within the office.
Yeah, absolutely. A sign of her rising through the ranks. And, it's also worth noting that before her time as an assistant U.S. attorney, she actually spent some time working in private practice. So that experience probably gave her a broader perspective, on the legal system as a whole and the different pressures and priorities that exist.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about her time as the U.S. attorney, because this is where her leadership and impact really become clear.
Yeah, so President Biden appointed her to this critical role back in 2021, and the fact that she was unanimously confirmed by the Senate speaks volumes, about her qualifications and the broad respect she held across party lines.
Yeah, and she served from October 2021 up until January of this year, 2025. And it's important to understand, for context, that she stepped down after President Trump took office. And this is fairly common practice for U.S. attorneys when there's a change in presidential administration.
Right, because they're political appointees, essentially.
Right, exactly. And it's a really key leadership position within the Department of Justice.
Absolutely. And it's, typical for a new administration to want to appoint their own people to those roles.
Right, makes sense. And during her time as the U.S. attorney, she was in charge of a huge operation, managing about 300 prosecutors, litigators, and support staff.
Yeah, and this was in a district that serves something like 6 million residents. So just think about the scale of that responsibility, the sheer volume of work they were handling.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is.
Wow. So to really understand her leadership, let's look at some of the big investigations that her office was involved in, because this is where we start to see the scope of her work.
Absolutely. Yeah. These cases really highlight the wide range of work that the U.S. Attorney's Office takes on. I mean, one notable case was the prosecution of Asif Rahman, a former CIA analyst.
Right. And he pled guilty in mid-January 2025 to charges related to keeping and transmitting top-secret national defense information.
Yeah, and then that information ended up on social media back in October 2024.
Oh, wow. So that raised huge national security concerns.
Yeah, I mean, think about that sensitive information just out there in the public domain.
Yeah, and Aber actually said at the time that Rahman's actions, placed lives at risk, undermined U.S. foreign relations, and compromised our ability to collect vital intelligence in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that really drives home the potential consequences of these kinds of breaches.
Yeah, it really does. It's a whole different world now with social media.
Right. It is. It's a whole new landscape when it comes to national security and the speed at which information can spread.
Absolutely. So another area that her office focused on was combating Russian cybercrime and money laundering.
Yeah.
And there was an indictment unsealed in September 2024 against 2 Russian nationals, Sergei Ivanov and Timur Shakhmamatov.
Yeah, and they were allegedly involved in providing money laundering services for cybercriminals and running these illegal cryptocurrency exchanges.
Oh, wow. And Aber had a really great quote about this. She said, "Every step cybercriminals take in their pursuit of money leaves another track that leads us to their doorstep. We will not stop, because while domains can always be seized, justice is unyielding."
Yeah, I mean, that really captures the persistence of law enforcement in this digital space.
Right, it does, yeah.
I mean, it's amazing how cybercrime, these international actors, and the U.S. Attorney's Office are all kind of intertwined now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there was the issue of illegal technology transfers to Russia. And back in November 2024, a Virginia-based company and its executives, they were accused of illegally shipping sensitive American technology to Russia.
Including to a company linked to the Kremlin and the FSB.
Wow.
So this was high-level stuff, and Aber really emphasized that we must not allow critical systems and technologies to be transferred to anyone who may use them against America and our global partners. Violations of the laws that protect our national security will be met with ardent prosecution.
That really highlights the importance of protecting American innovation and making sure that sensitive technologies don't fall into the wrong hands.
It does. Yeah, it raises all sorts of questions about the role of a U.S. attorney in safeguarding not just national security, but also, our nation's technological edge.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then finally, we should mention her office's involvement in the indictment related to war crimes in Ukraine in late 2023.
Right. 4 individuals with ties to Russia were charged with torture, inhuman treatment, and unlawful confinement of a U.S. national after the 2022 invasion.
Wow.
Their names were Surin Saranovich, Akurshin, Dmitry Budnik, Valery, and Nazar.
Okay.
And Aber stated that her office was proud to be at the forefront of the Justice Department's effort to hold perpetrators of war crimes violations accountable in Ukraine and will continue to pursue them.
That shows just how far-reaching her office's work was, even into international justice.
It does. It really shows their commitment to holding people accountable for these serious human rights abuses, even if they happen overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can see, her time as U.S. Attorney was filled with some really complex and high-stakes challenges.
Oh, absolutely. And, the reactions and tributes that poured in after her death really highlight the impact she had during her time as U.S. Attorney and throughout her career.
Yeah, right after her death, interim U.S. Attorney Eric S. Siebert said that the office was heartbroken beyond words, and he described her as unmatched as a leader, mentor, and prosecutor.
And he said she was simply irreplaceable as a human being.
Yeah. And he even mentioned that he joined the division the year after she did and talked about how much he admired her accomplishments.
It's really striking how often she's described as both a brilliant legal mind and a respected leader. You don't always see those two qualities together so strongly.
Yeah. And Virginia Attorney General Pam Bondi called her passing deeply tragic. And then Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares, he praised her public service and especially her work with Ceasefire Virginia.
And he said that work saved more lives than we may ever realize.
Wow, so powerful.
Yeah, it shows her commitment to community safety went beyond just federal prosecutions.
It does. And then U.S. Senator Tim Kaine, he also said she was an exceptional public servant. So you can see the respect and admiration came from across the political spectrum.
Absolutely. It really speaks to the positive impact she had and the high regard in which she was held.
Yeah. And, it's interesting that just before she stepped down in January 2025, she told CBS News that she was looking forward to continuing her legal career in the private sector. So it sounds like she had a lot of plans and ambitions that were cut short.
Yeah, it adds a whole other layer to this story. Makes you think about all the potential contributions that are now lost.
Yeah, so we've really explored the career of a truly dedicated public servant who rose through the ranks, led a crucial U.S. Attorney's office, and tackled some incredibly important issues.
Yeah, we really wanted to go beyond those initial headlines about Jessica Aber's death, and I think we've done that.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that the investigation into her death is still ongoing, and we're still waiting for that official medical examiner's report. So while we have some early information, the exact cause of death is still unknown.
That's right.
But one thing that really stands out to me is the contrast between her impactful work and her relatively young age. She's only 43.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the dedication and the responsibility that people in public service have, often for many, many years.
Absolutely. So here's something to consider. Think about all the different issues that Jessica Aber's office was involved in, from national security to local community safety. What does her leadership across all those areas tell us about the role of the U.S. Attorney in our society?
It's a really important question, and maybe even more broadly, take a moment to think about the people behind the headlines, those dedicated professionals whose work often goes unseen, but that work has a huge impact on our safety, our security, and the pursuit of justice.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.